Y'all, this divorce is clean but murky. Clean but murky. We're going to talk about the details of Cynthia Bailey's divorce from Mike Hill, as well as this podcast that she did with Carlos King, where a lot of tea was spilled, okay? Now, I have been meaning to try to do this video ever since Friday when the podcast came out, but it has been so much going on my end, and with news and recaps, today is the day we're finally able to sit down and discuss this in detail, or at least the highlights, the stuff you need to know. One of the things that I thought was interesting about this conversation is we really get a sense of Cynthia's value when it comes to the perception of the network as well as the producers, because Cynthia really did provide a lot for the show. And Carlos is very he acknowledges that right off the bat. Like, if they needed place to film, last minute, if they needed something to be done quickly, Cynthia was there to give her all, and she always had locations for them to use throughout her time on the show. So much so that at a certain point, she didn't know if they would even be able to do any more group scenes at her establishments or hosted by her, because they had already done so much. Like in season 6, apparently another producer told Carlos, do not film Cynthia Bailey's Bailey Bowl. This is the place where Marlo and Nene got into it, and Marlo was talking about Nene's Donald Trump wig. Cynthia always had a place to shoot and pull together an event, and she got that a lot from the producers. Now, Carlos ended up coming back to the show in season 8 because allegedly, according to Carlos, another producer wasn't producing. And I'm like, let me go back and see who that producer was. Anyway, he needed a Cynthia Bailey event, and that's when Sheree came in on the rooftop. Y'all remember that. Now, going back to season 6 as another example, the white party at the Bailey agency when Kenya and Nene got into it about Nene inviting Walter to her wedding. Now, Carlos says without Cynthia, the show would not have been the hit that it is, okay? And Cynthia says she's really proud of herself because she remained on the show and she never came out of her character in terms of having to feel like she did something that she didn't necessarily want to do. Although she did have moments where she had to spill some tea, like when she had to let Phaedra know about that whole Mr. Chocolate situation. And she says that she hated doing those types of things. She never enjoyed spilling the tea. Now, Carlos, for his part, says when he casts shows, he says, okay, this is a good cast, but who is going to be our Cynthia Bailey? And every show has a person like Cynthia Bailey who is able to bring balance to the show. My question to you guys who, follow this channel, who do you guys think the Cynthia Bailey is on Potomac? I think that's a really, really good question. Anyway, he says that the great thing about Cynthia is that she gave a lot of her personal story and she could always rally the troops, and all the girls always showed up to Cynthia Bailey's events. He even goes so far as to say that season 3 would have been a flop without Cynthia because we saw the real and raw with her and Peter. There was the friend contract. I didn't realize that was season 3. Dang it. Anyway, Carlos asked, was she ever told or did she ever feel that without Peter or Nene that she would not survive on the show? Cynthia says yes. And she also says that Peter even told her that at one point during the middle of an argument. She says, but years later, and there she still was, and he was not there. But she knew that when they divorced, she was not going to drag him publicly. She might have drug him privately, but not publicly. And he was also the one who convinced her to take the meeting for Housewives, and that she first tested with Derek J. And that's very interesting because Derek J wasn't exactly a main character. He was more of a side player on the show who was actually very integral at the time. Sort of like the friends of the show without being really labeled a friend before the friend thing became a thing. So Cynthia reveals that she was also put with Nene, and she did feel some comfortability with Nene being the star of the show and being her best girlfriend. It gave her some kind of safety. So she gives props to Nene as well. Now, speaking of Nene, yes, she did. hear about that interview with Larry Reid, wherein Larry Reid called Cynthia beautiful. And Nene responded, "Oh, really? Have you seen her in person?" Yes, she saw it, and yes, she definitely took it as shade. But she's not surprised when Nene throws her shade because she feels like she herself looks great, and fans always tell her that she looks much prettier in person. And right now, she's just not choosing to participate in anything that's negative energy. She's focused on her acting, this next chapter as she leaves her marriage, and apparently Nene reached out to her before that interview to ask her out for drinks. However, after seeing that interview, Cynthia is really not too sure she wants to have those drinks. Okay. Now, Cynthia and Mike's divorce. Here we go. This is where things get a little murky. Now, Carlos asked, did she ignore any of the red flags? And she says that people don't know the ins and outs of someone's marriage. And there were even red flags with Peter, and she still married him. And I'm like, girl, if you see red flags with somebody, why would you marry them? But anyway, she says she meets people where they are. And when she fell in love with Mike, whatever was going on in his past had nothing to do with how he was going to show up for her. She still loves Mike Hill, and she's still going through a transition with acting, and he's in a transition with his work, and they would just be better off as friends. But she does point out that she's only been married twice, and she has no regrets and is still optimistic about finding love again. Now, with regards to infidelity, she says this to Carlos: it's none of other people's business. Marriages can withstand infidelity. And she says, you live your life, and whatever your cross is to bear, it's her life. Love is love, and what works for your marriage is your option. That really did not answer the question, okay? It did not. But when you dig deeper, if you guys go to page 6, there's an article from about a week ago where Cynthia retracted a claim that her ex, Mike Hill, had cheated, and he responded. Now, this is interesting because in court documents obtained by page 6, it was alleged that Mike Hill cheated on her, and that's the real reason for the divorce, despite previously shutting down any infidelity claims. These documents were filed, I guess, on that Thursday in Fulton County, and they claim that the petitioner, who is Cynthia, is entitled to a divorce from the respondent, who is Hill, due to inappropriate adulterous relations and moral ethics in his conduct. Now, Mike then told page 6 exclusively that the cheating claims made in the court filing were an error, and his ex-wife legal team is releasing statements retracting this. My question is, how does the legal team get that wrong? That makes no sense to me. How do they get that so majorly wrong? How do you choose the option that says inappropriate adulterous relations and moral ethics in his conduct and mistake that for irreconcilable differences? That's a stretch right there, but whatever. Whoever made that mistake, that's a big mistake, okay? He says, I have love and respect for Cynthia. I always have and always will. As you heard in her own words, there was never at any time in our marriage any inappropriate adulterous relations. Our marriage didn't work, but we still remain the best of friends. Now, the rep then did come back and tell, the rep for Cynthia then came back and told page 6 that they clarified this and that it was based on mutual irreconcilable differences. And then she added, I have never accused Mike of any inappropriate adulterous actions. We are and always will be friends and wish each other well. Now, attorney Daniel R. Meacham tells page 6 that the initial divorce filing between Cynthia and Mike, which included inappropriate adulterous relations, was incorrect. The sole reason for the pending divorce is due to only irreconcilable differences. An amended petition is being filed immediately to correct the allegation by the legal representation of Meacham and Associates. Again, how do you get that wrong? Also, separate court documents obtained by page 6 on Thursday were labeled as a motion to seal and appear to reaffirm the allegations that Hill cheated. This is what page 6 says. They noted that the divorce should be kept private because it may, quote, raise issues concerning both the moral character and embarrassing acts of one of the parties. These facts are perceived to have a strong probability of potentially adversely compromising one of both parties' reputation, image, business dealings, and will significantly harm the parties mental, psychologically, financially, and emotionally, is what the documents also state. Okay? So Cynthia and Mike are saying there's no adultery involved, but the documents state that they are to be sealed because of the potential for adverse consequences. I'm paraphrasing that. But I'm going to put the article down in the description so you guys can read it for yourself. I just found that interesting, and it does make the situation a bit murky and confusing. Just to let you know, though, they did reach a settlement agreement in their divorce. You know, they were able to have a clean break, and because they had their own financial assets. You know, they had 2 separate, distinct residences, and they have their own retirement accounts and insurance plans. They both declined to pay each other alimony, and that's pretty much it. There's no chance of reconciliation, and Cynthia signed off on the settlement agreement on November 1st, while Mike signed off on it on October the 20th. So that is where we are with the divorce. It is kind of confusing about how they can make such a huge error. And she herself, in her response to Carlos King, was kind of cagey about it. So I don't know. You guys have to let me know what you think about it. Clearly, these are 2 grown adult people, so they can do as they choose, and they can keep those details as private as they want. But looking at the data that we have here in the articles, it does force you to raise some eyebrows and question about what really is going on. Is it that something else happened and they just don't want to say what it is? Clearly that's it. But whatever it is, we won't ever know. So let me know what your thoughts are. Now, one of the things that I thought was interesting as well was that there was an insinuation in Mike's book that, you know, he was going to get exposure from doing the Steve Harvey show wherein he met Cynthia. And she says that, well, he probably did do it for exposure, but she didn't see anything wrong with that. But the other question that Carlos asked her was that people were talking about, well, maybe because she wasn't asked back to Real Housewives of Atlanta, that maybe he was no longer interested in her because it would not benefit him, because it wouldn't be able to promote him. And she says that's quite the contrary. He was actually the advocate for her to step out and do other things. Now, she also spoke a little bit about, you know, her being offered a friend contract, as we had previously heard. She says that she thought about it for a little while, but when she realized that she wouldn't just be able to pick and choose when she chose to come into the season, and she would actually have to, you know, film the duration of the season and just make less money, she was like, nah, she not doing that. All right. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting was that she says that she never got called into Bravo's office for not delivering. Bravo always sent her her contract, her offer letter early on in the process, and that she is appreciative because while she didn't see herself as the star of the show, she definitely felt appreciated by the network. When asked whether or not she could choose her dream Real Housewives of Atlanta cast, interestingly enough, she chose Eva, Kenya, Candy, and Portia because Carlos asked her to just choose 4 other people to star on the show with her. I thought she would have chosen Nene over Portia, but in light of what Nene had to say about her during that interview with Larry Reed, I'm not surprised that she didn't say Nene, because I would assume at this point, with Nene kind of shading her about her looks, that maybe Nene would not be top person on her list to do a show with again, okay? Carlos was shocked as well that she chose Portia, and he was like, even though you kicked her? And she was like, yes, she had a lot to drink that day. She was going through issues in her marriage. So listen, it was what it was. The podcast interview was very good. But let me tell you something. These articles from Page 6, man, y'all need to get into them. With that being said, we wish Cynthia Bailey the best. I think that she is a class act, and that looking back on it, as much as I felt like at times I kind of thought maybe her time was up on the show, I will say that she did provide a great balance, and she definitely has some standout moments on that show. So Cynthia Bailey, you are a true class act, and I cannot wait to see what you do next. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comment section down below, and I will catch you in the next video.